It was 2:13 a.m. when Mara Ellis woke to a sound she couldn't place. A soft, dragging shuffle echoed from the end of the hallway outside her bedroom. She froze, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. The darkness seemed thicker than usual, pressing against the edges of the room. She barely dared to breathe. Then a shape emerged, tall, distorted, and impossibly still. Mara's first instinct was to scream, but the figure vanished before she could move. Dylan, her older brother, burst into the room seconds later. "Mara, what?" His voice cut through the silence. I didn't see anything," she whispered, but her wide eyes betrayed the fear she couldn't put into words. The night ended without explanation, but Mara could not shake the feeling of being watched. Over the next few mornings, small anomalies began to pile up. The front gate, always locked the night before, was discovered slightly ajar, swinging as if someone had passed through it silently. Doors that should have been secured were found unlocked. Lights flickered and turned on in rooms no one had entered. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, but something was wrong, and the family felt it in the tense silence that lingered through the house. Dylan, practical and methodical, insisted on solutions. "Cameras," he said, his fingers already searching online for motion-activated security devices. The rest of the family hesitated, unsure whether these disturbances were mere accidents or the work of someone, or something else. The first undeniable proof arrived one morning on the porch. A folded piece of paper, carefully placed where Mara would find it, bore a single drawing, a heart with her full name written neatly beneath it. No envelope, no signature, just her name and the implication that someone had been watching. The police were called, but as usual, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no leads. That night, cameras went up. One covering the front yard, another in the backyard, and a third inside the hallway near the bedrooms. For several nights, footage revealed nothing unusual. Then it happened. On one recording, a dark figure appeared in the backyard. It moved slowly, almost unnaturally, bending in ways no human should. Curiously, the front-facing camera captured nothing at all. Mara and Dylan replayed the clip over and over, each loop deepening their unease. Tension escalated when Evelyn, their mother, experienced her own encounter. Walking through the hallway after checking on her youngest niece, she froze as a shadow moved unnaturally across the wall, disappearing when she called for Dylan. "You're imagining it," he said, though even he could not shake the creeping sensation that something was off. That evening, while the family attempted a calm dinner, a scratching noise came from the basement. Plates clattered as Dylan jumped to investigate, flashlight in hand. Mara's eyes darted nervously to the hallway. "It's probably just the pipes," she muttered, but the sound continued, irregular and deliberate. The entity, Mara realized, wasn't just outside. It had a presence inside the house itself. Every subtle movement, every shadow felt deliberate. Time seemed to stretch and warp in the hallways. Clocks occasionally ticked backward. A mug on the counter appeared in a different position than it had been placed minutes before. By the end of the week, Mara was hypervigilant. Every creak, every whisper of wind against the windows felt like proof of someone or something watching. The family's initial skepticism was gone. Rational explanations no longer sufficed. They had crossed the threshold into fear that could not be reasoned away. And that fear was only the beginning. Days passed, and Mara's fear grew into a constant, gnawing awareness. The ordinary walls of the Ellis house no longer offered comfort. Every corner seemed like it could hide a presence. Then the second proof arrived. A moment that would cement the family's realization that they were being observed. It was a folded photograph, left on the porch where the first note had appeared. Mara's hand shook as she opened it. The image showed a man sitting on the edge of her bed, perfectly still, framed in the doorway. Her room, her sanctuary, violated without a sound. Dylan stared over her shoulder, disbelief etched on his face. "How?" he whispered. "We've been watched," Mara said, her voice barely audible. The police were called once again. Officers searched every room, every window, every door. Still, there were no signs of forced entry. Nothing to suggest how someone had gotten inside, or if it was even possible by ordinary means. The lack of evidence only intensified the fear. It was as if the house itself had become a trap, monitored by a force they could not see. The family installed additional security measures: stronger locks, motion lights, and cameras in the hallways. For a short time, it seemed as though they might regain control. Then subtle distortions began to appear. Hallways stretched imperceptibly, clocks ticked backward for brief moments, and reflections in mirrors seemed delayed. Mara started waking in the night to soft whispers, never intelligible, but always in her ear, always unseen. One evening, Evelyn encountered something that would haunt her memory. She had just returned from checking the kitchen when she saw a dark, hunched figure at the far end of the hallway. It did not move like a human. Its limbs bent unnaturally, and it lingered just long enough for Evelyn to freeze, heart pounding, before it disappeared into the shadows. Dylan tried to rationalize every event. "We're tired, stressed, imagining things," he said, though the tension in his voice betrayed doubt. Mara, however, knew better. Something unexplainable was in the house, and it was patient, observant, and deliberate. If your heart is racing with Mara, hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. That night, the basement once again became a source of terror. Scratching and tapping noises echoed from below. Mara and Dylan approached cautiously. The beam of their flashlight revealed nothing, yet every step felt measured, like someone or something was anticipating their movements. When they reached the basement doorway, the light flickered, and a shadow detached itself from the corner for a heartbeat, vanishing before either could react. The psychological toll began to show. Mara struggled to sleep. Every creak of the house was amplified. She found herself checking locks repeatedly, pacing hallways, and sometimes talking to herself to ward off the rising panic. Dylan, too, found his confidence eroding. Nights once calm and predictable had become exercises in fear management. The entity, which the family began calling the Watcher, had escalated. It was no longer just outside. It had insinuated itself into the very perception of the household. Each member felt its gaze, even in empty rooms. Objects shifted positions. Shadows stretched or paused unnaturally. Even the security cameras, once a symbol of control, now sometimes captured flickers of the figure in impossible postures, angles that defied logic. The tension reached a breaking point when Mara walked past the hallway mirror late one night. Her reflection lagged behind her movements. A dark silhouette mirrored seconds after she moved, grinning in a way she was not. She stumbled back, heart racing, and leaned against the wall, gasping. This was no longer a question of if something was happening, it was definitely happening. Dylan, observing the growing strain, made a plan. "We document everything, every sound, every shadow," he said. "We'll prove what's happening." Cameras were reoriented, lights adjusted, and meticulous logs maintained. But even this meticulous preparation brought only short-term reassurance. The entity adapted, moving just outside the reach of their recordings, watching and waiting. If your skin is crawling, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. Things are about to get much worse. By the end of this week, the Ellis family lived under a constant veil of anxiety. Every night brought new disturbances, and no matter how rational Dylan tried to be, the evidence, the notes, the photograph, the shifting shadows, refused to be ignored. The house was no longer a home. It was a stage for an entity whose motives were unknowable, whose patience was infinite, and whose presence was impossible to shake. Late one evening, Mara decided to check the storage room for an old box of belongings. The house was unusually silent, the kind of silence that makes every small sound scream. As she stepped inside, the door clicked shut behind her. Her pulse jumped. She yanked at the handle. Locked. The dim light from her flashlight revealed a shape at the far end of the room. It was tall, almost human, but wrong, limbs bending at impossible angles, posture rigid and unnatural. The figure didn't move, but Mara could feel its attention like a weight pressing down. Every instinct screamed to run, but her feet refused to cooperate. She stumbled backward, catching herself against a shelf. Suddenly the figure shifted. Not like a person walking, but more like a shadow stretching toward her. Panic surged and Mara screamed, a raw, shattering sound. She bolted, finally forcing the door open, and collapsed in the hallway. Dylan and Evelyn rushed in immediately, but the storage room was empty. Only the faint smell of dust and cold lingered. The incident left Mara physically drained. Over the next 2 weeks, she was hospitalized, her body recovering faster than her mind. Even in the sterile quiet of her hospital room, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Hallucinations of shifting shadows and whispered voices haunted her waking hours. Dylan stayed by her side, guilt and fear warring in his mind. "We have to figure this out," he said, voice tight with worry. Upon her return home, the family tried to regain a sense of normalcy. Dylan rechecked every corner, every lock, and every camera. It was then that Gareth, her father, discovered something chilling. Hidden in the thick brush near the backyard, a small trail camera had been placed, pointing not just at the yard, but directly at Mara's bedroom window. Gareth's hands trembled as he lifted the device. He inserted a memory card into the laptop, revealing footage that made the family collectively freeze. Night after night, a man, or something indistinguishable as fully human, walked silently near the property, occasionally pausing as if observing. Sometimes the figure lingered near Mara's bedroom window for minutes at a time. It never interacted, never spoke, but the intent was clear. He was watching, always watching. Dylan replayed the footage over and over. "How long has this been happening?" he whispered. Mara, sitting quietly beside him, didn't answer. Words felt inadequate. Fear had grown into a physical presence, wrapping around the family, tightening with each passing night. The entity, now clearly the Watcher, had escalated beyond subtle disturbances. It was no longer just playing with perception. It had become a calculated presence, infiltrating spaces the family assumed were private. That evening, while the family gathered to discuss their next steps, the house seemed to sigh. A soft exhalation through the vents, the flicker of lights in the hallways. Every instinct screamed that the entity was aware of their discussions, waiting, observing, preparing for what would come next. If your skin is crawling right now, take a second to hit like and subscribe. You'll want to see how far the Watcher will go. Dylan proposed documenting every event meticulously, logging times, locations, and camera angles. But even with precise tracking, the Watcher seemed always one step ahead. Every night brought subtle shifts, shadows where none should be, objects slightly moved, whispers faint and just beyond hearing. Mara, already fragile from the storage room trauma, began experiencing brief lapses in perception, as if seconds were missing from her memory. Dylan noticed her staring at walls for long periods, muttering to herself. Evelyn and Gareth exchanged worried glances, realizing that fear alone wasn't the only danger. The entity was eroding Mara's mind, one night at a time. By the end of this section, the Ellis family understood one thing with terrifying clarity. The Watcher wasn't just observing. It was learning, adapting, and waiting. Weeks passed, and the Ellis family's fear deepened into a constant vigilance. Every night, they moved through the house as if traversing a minefield. Lights were left on in every room, cameras carefully positioned, doors double-locked. Yet still the disturbances persisted, more aggressive, more intentional. One night, Mara was roused by the beam of a flashlight sweeping across the backyard, angled directly at her bedroom window. Her breath caught in her throat. She dialed Dylan, whispering, "It's out there, right outside." Dylan sprinted to the window, but the figure retreated into the shadows before he could get a clear look. Panic surged, adrenaline and fear twisting together. Gareth, determined to confront the intruder, grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the yard. Mara and Dylan followed cautiously. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but the familiar outlines of the yard. The night seemed unnaturally still, every rustle magnified. The figure reappeared, moving silently between trees and yard objects, always just beyond the reach of the light. Gareth attempted to corner it near the side fence, but as he approached, the figure vanished again, leaving no footprints, no disturbance, no explanation. The family's frustration mounted. Even the cameras had captured nothing definitive. The intruder or entity had learned to avoid detection, or perhaps it was never fully human. If your heart is racing as much as theirs, hit like and subscribe. You'll want to stay until the very end. Days later, the family faced the most terrifying encounter yet. Mara had been asleep when a series of loud impacts against her bedroom window jolted her awake. Groggy and terrified, she peered into the darkness. A bald figure stood outside, repeatedly banging its head against the glass while maintaining a fixed, unblinking gaze. The sound was muffled yet chilling, echoing through the quiet house like a warning. Dylan, already halfway down the stairs, froze. "Get back!" he shouted. Mara stumbled backward, heart racing, as Gareth grabbed a flashlight and charged toward the window. But when they reached it, the figure was gone, vanished into the night as if it had never been there. The glass showed no marks except faint condensation from breath, yet the terror lingered. The police were called once again. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, reviewed camera footage, and questioned the family. A potential suspect was identified, but he provided an alibi and there were no injuries matching the event, leaving the case unresolved. The entity had proven it could manipulate perception, avoid evidence, and invade private space at will. Inside the house, the emotional strain was palpable. Mara barely slept, jumping at every creak. Dylan felt powerless despite his best efforts. Evelyn and Gareth argued quietly over what could be done. The family realized with sinking dread that this was no ordinary stalker. Something far older, patient, and intelligent had entwined itself with their lives. Late one evening, after everyone had retreated to their rooms, Mara paused by the hallway mirror. Her reflection lagged slightly, a shadowy outline grinning behind her movements, reminding her that the watcher was always near, always observing, even when invisible. By now, the family understood one terrifying truth. Their home was no longer theirs. It belonged to the entity. Their control was an illusion, fragile and fleeting. Every precaution brought only a temporary sense of safety. The question now was not if it would appear, but when it would strike again. The night air was heavy with tension as the Ellis family prepared for what they knew might be the final confrontation. The watcher had grown bolder, more invasive, and impossibly patient. Every sound in the house, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rustle of trees outside, felt like a countdown. Mara, Dylan, Evelyn, and Gareth gathered in the living room, their flashlights casting long, trembling shadows along the walls. "We can't stay," Mara whispered, voice tight with fear. It's too strong here. We have to leave now." Gareth shook his head. "We can't just run. Not yet. It's waiting for us to leave." His hands trembled, but there was determination in his eyes. They had discovered symbolic carvings on the property earlier, subtle sigils etched into fence posts and trees, evidence that the watcher's presence was tied to the land itself, a force that fed on fear and observation. As the family debated, shadows began stretching unnaturally along the walls. Shapes coalesced at the edges of the rooms, humanoid, yet impossible, limbs bent at inhuman angles, heads tilting in ways no human could. The watcher was here, fully aware, testing the family's resolve. If your heart is pounding with theirs, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. This is the moment everything changes. Gareth made a decision. Using the symbolic carvings as a guide, he prepared a makeshift ritual. arranging household objects in precise positions to disrupt the watcher's hold. Mara and Dylan understood immediately. Gareth was sacrificing himself to give the rest of the family a chance to escape. The entity reacted almost immediately. Shadows thickened, and the air felt heavier, compressing around them like a living thing. Mara could hear the distorted echoes of footsteps multiplying throughout the house, whispers of every fear she had ever felt amplified. Evelyn clutched Mara's arm. Go now," she urged, tears in her eyes. Dylan helped Mara and Evelyn to the door. As they ran toward the car, the house behind them seemed to stretch and warp, hallways elongating, windows flickering, as if the building itself were resisting their departure. They glanced back once, and through the dim moonlight, they saw Gareth standing in the center of the living room, surrounded by glowing symbols, arms raised. The Watcher's shadows swirled around him, then recoiled as if repelled. The car doors slammed. Engines roared. They drove away without looking back. Behind them, the house fell silent, the oppressive presence finally stilled, or at least temporarily subdued. If this ending sent chills down your spine, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what comes next in stories like this. Hours later, the family stopped at a roadside diner, catching their breath. Mara stared out the window at the distant house, now a small silhouette against the dark woods. "Do you think it's gone?" she whispered. Dylan shrugged, uneasy. "I don't know. Might be waiting for someone else. Or maybe for us if we ever return." The ending left them alive but not unscarred. Fear, vigilance, and uncertainty lingered. Even now, shadows seemed deeper in corners, whispers almost imperceptible in quiet moments. The Watcher was dormant, patient, a force tied to place and perception, its story unresolved, its gaze eternal.